So hi, my name is Zach, and in this video I'm going to show you how I use the memory technique called the method of Loci to memorize an important concept from my social sciences, which are the three main methodological approaches, also known as paradigms. These are essential to understanding how research is done in the social sciences, and I found that this technique really helped me make them stick in my memory. So first, I'll explain the theory that I tried to memorize using the method. In social sciences, when researchers study people, behavior, or society, they often follow one of the three main approaches, each with its own proper goals and methods. The first is a positivist approach, which is probably the most scientific of the three. It focuses on explaining human behavior by finding patterns like the trends in crime rates or education levels and analyzing them from experiments or statistics. The goal here is to be objective and data driven, much like how researchers work in the natural sciences. Thinkers like Auguste Comte, who is considered like the father of sociology, and Durkheim, who studied the suicide patterns, are both associated with this approach. The second is the interpretive approach, which is more about understanding the meaning behind human behavior instead of just observing patterns. Researchers using this method try to understand what motivates people, like why people join a protest or how someone defines their identity. This approach relies on things like interviews, case studies, and fieldwork to get closer to the human experience. The key thinker associated with this paradigm is Max Weber, who believed that researchers should try to understand people's values and reasons for acting the way they do. The last approach I'll explain is a critical approach, which focuses on power, inequality, and social change. This method challenges the status quo and asks the big questions about who benefits from the way society is currently structured. Researchers using this approach often conduct historical or comparative studies to expose injustices and try to push for progress. The most famous thinker for a critical approach is Karl Marx, who believed that social research should not only understand the world, but help change it, especially by revealing systems of oppression or inequality. So how did I memorize all that? That's a lot of stuff to memorize, and I had a big test for it. So I use a method Loci, which is also called like the memory palace technique. Basically, it involves taking places they know really well. So in my case, it's going to be my house, and placing each idea or the concept that you want to remember into a different room or location. And then when you mentally walk through that space, you see the information in a proper order, and that helps you recall it without needing your notes. So I'll walk through how I did it. So I started at the front door. Right there on the porch, I imagine a scientist with a lab coat holding a clipboard. I went like really into detail with it, and he's doing experiments. There's a microscope and a beaker right next to it, and that scientist is a positivist approach because they're more science based, and just like picture him being very serious, getting data, not talking to anyone, because positivists want to remain objective and detached from everybody, and that's just my visual like anchor for that approach. It just like helps me understand it much more. And then I step into the living room. On the couch, you can see a man wearing round glasses and holding a magnifying glass. That one's Max Weber, and he's interviewing my family, asking like deep questions about their beliefs and their life goals. There's like sticky notes on the walls with like big keywords that have to do with the approach. And the last one is that reminds me of the interpretive approach, which is more about understanding the reasons behind behavior through interviews and case studies. And that's where I got the sticky notes from. That's where I got the interviewing from. It's a lot easier to memorize it with like that kind of stuff like in the way. And then finally walking into the kitchen, and this is where like gets like big. There's Karl Marx with the big hammer smashing down like our kitchen, and there's gears and wires, like hidden systems inside it that represent the inequality and social structures of the kitchen. And he's just like screaming at the top of his lungs and saying things like oppression, like change the system. And then this has to do with the critical approach because it focuses on exposing the power dynamics and challenging unfair systems that have to do like inside the kitchen essentially. Now that like I've created these strong mental images in familiar places, every time I walk through my house in my mind and recall each approach without notes, at the front door there's the positivist approach, living room with Max Weber doing I can easily walk through my house in my mind and recall each approach with our notes. At the front door is a scientist, the positive approach. In their living room, there's Max Weber doing interviews, that's interpretive. And then in the kitchen, there's Karl Marx smashing walls, that's critical. Each space and image is linked to key features that have to do with each approach, and the visual storytelling makes it way easier to remember everything. And yeah, that's basically how I use a method loci to memorize the 3 methodological paradigms in the social sciences that I had to memorize for my exam a couple weeks ago. So I create a memory structure that I can revisit anytime. Every time I lie down in the living room or the kitchen or I go outside, it all comes back to me like right away, and it's still very helpful. So thank you for watching this, and that's my episode.